The rocky shorelines of Maui, Hawaii, remained firm against the churning seas. Elany on a clear March morning in 1909. A mother of 19 has been surrounded by the water her whole life. She was as used to the sound of the waves breaking on the coast as she was to the beat of her own heart. She felt the salty mist land on her skin like a soothing caress as she stared out at the boundless Pacific. Blues and grays were woven together in the sky above. The clouds were swaying and circling like living things. Although the pebbles at her feet were hard and jagged, their stability somehow gave her peace. Due to the sea's unfathomable secrets and constantly shifting moods, Elany had always been attracted to it. She had devoted many hours to discovering the tidal pools and watching the tides come in and go out. The sea had a vitality and energy to her, making her a living entity. The sun beat down on Elany's skin, warming her and giving her a peaceful feeling as she moved over the rocky shorelines of Paella. She had come here in order to collect opihai, which are tiny shellfish that cling to the rocks beside the sea. She worked peacefully in the background of the sound of the waves, lapping on the coast, humming a melody to herself as she looked for the ideal shell. But when she went to grab a particular obstinate shell, she suddenly felt water flood up around her ankles. She was thrown into the sea by a large wave that hit the coast before she could respond. She attempted to get to her feet as fear set in, but the currents were too powerful, and she was swiftly dragged away from the safety of the land. The force of the water was in control of Alana's body. She is being dragged into the ocean and overturned by the waves. She struggled to keep afloat, but the currents were relentless, and her strength was eroding swiftly. Her surroundings were a vertiginous swirl of turquoise and green ocean, bright light beams of sunshine streaming down. Despite the turbulent currents that were attempting to suffocate her, Lonnie's years of swimming expertise worked to her advantage. She struggled and kicked her way to the top, breaking past the water's barrier while gasping for oxygen. Her rejoicing was, however, fleeting. A big great white shark with a length of 15 feet swam towards her as an unexpected shadow suddenly clouded the water underneath her. In a swirl of fear and bewilderment, its razor-sharp fangs are seen when its jaws gape wide with lightning. Fast speed. The enormous animal buried its fangs into her legs as Elany watched, its sharp teeth mercilessly tearing through flesh and muscle. Elany made an effort to escape the shark's lethal hold, but she was unable to do so. With a loud growl, its jaws closed like a vice. On the water's surface, the enormous shark thrashed and turned. Elany is being battered by its size like a rag doll in a dog's mouth. Savage force was used to throw her body about. Her limbs were twitching and twisting crazily, and her head was banging into the water. Agony-filled dance. The shark's jaws then reclosed around Lonnie's legs with a painful crunch. But this time, there was no way out. As the water became crimson, the shark's teeth tore through her skin and bones like a hot knife through butter, snapping her body in half. The shark thrashed and twisted in a violent rage, covered in Alana's blood. Its eyes gleamed with a cold, vicious desire, and its teeth were wet with blood. The only sounds for a little while were the tremendous roar of the water and the crushing of bones, and the world seemed to slow to a crawl. The shark finally let go of Lonnie's corpse with a last shudder before vanishing into the ocean depths. It returned to Lonnie's damaged body with an intensity that was horrifying since the shark's appetite was insatiable. Its mouth mercilessly tore at her skin and bones as it snapped and seized. It seemed as if the shark had made up its mind to leave nothing behind but a heap of broken bones and torn flesh before ending the attack with a savage snap. Elany's head was severed from her body with a terrible crunch as the shark's fangs wrapped around her neck. The scene was so horrifying it beyond description. It was a brutal act of nature that demonstrated the ocean's real might. The most dreadful predator. However, the shark's ferocious jaw snap was not yet enough to satisfy it. It seemed as if it was going to seize its prey and eat it in a covert lair as it latched onto Lonnie's arm and pulled her dead corpse into the depths below. An anxious search team searched the beach after hearing of the event, casting a keen eye over the murky waters for any indication of Elany. But what they discovered was a horrifying scene that will stay with them forever. they saw a mangled tangle of flesh and bone being ripped apart and knotted by a terrifying predator's razor-sharp teeth in the rough-changing waves. Elany was completely destroyed by it. Her corpse had been reduced to a hideous pile of ripped flesh and broken bone. As they saw the actual strength of the ocean's deadliest predator, the search party's greatest fears came true. They were aware that Elany had perished horribly at the hands of a ruthless murderer. The merciless depths mercilessly took her life from her. Jimmy felt chills go down his spine as he went into the docks in Galveston, Texas, on a brisk September morning in 1909. The noises of clashing metal and creaking wood surrounded him, while his other crew members painstakingly prepared their ship for a month-long fishing expedition. Activity was thriving at the shipyard. Galveston watched as the ropes were properly wound and secured in knots. Texas was a thriving center of business and manufacturing, with the city's marine economy being centered in its shipyards. Ships of various sizes and forms were lined up along the water's edge at the shipyard, which was a tangle of wooden docks and soaring cranes. The repetitive thud of hammers striking the woodworkers and the sounds of metal clashing on metal filled the air. They moved bulky tools and supplies from one end of the yard to the other, while scurrying about like ants in their work attire. All those who traveled by the region on board the ship breathed in the fragrant smell of fish oil and perspiration borne on the salty ocean air. Jimmy Lowe, standing outside, taking in the warm sun's rays and the sea air's saltiness. A loud splash abruptly shattered his pleasant thoughts. He abruptly sprang up and ran over to the side of the ship. He spotted his crewmate, and his heart jumped in his throat. Tony was struggling in the water and yelling for assistance. Jimmy stares into the shadowy depths, his heart thumping with terror. He saw Tony fighting to maintain his balance, injured as a result of the collision. Jimmy took immediate action to rescue Tony from the perilous seas by grabbing a lifebuoy and diving overboard. The other crew members immediately looked up from above their necks as Jimmy swam towards Tony. They are startled by the shadowy figure lurking below the surface. They concerned for Jimmy and Tony's safety since they were all too aware of the risks present in the ocean stairs. When Jimmy finally got to Tony, he skillfully wrapped the life ring around him. The crewmen above responded to his signal to bring them back aboard the ship by pulling ferociously. As they battled to rescue Jimmy and Tony, the strain of the endeavor was visible on their faces. A monster thing suddenly burst with horrifying power out of the waters as the crew members desperately struggled to lift Jimmy and Tony out of the water. It was a large bull shark measuring 14 feet. It opens its strong jaws in a frightening manner, exposing its sharp teeth. The shark approached Jimmy with deadly purpose as it advanced at a lightning-fast pace. Its teeth had quickly clamped down on his leg. Its razor-sharp fangs tore into muscle and tissue. A blood-curdling scream from Jimmy shattered the air and reverberated throughout the shipyard. In the water, the shark thrashed, Jimmy along with it. It resumed its vicious assault. The sea surrounding them was soaked with blood, a graphic illustration of Jimmy's pain and the shark's savagery. The crew members were horrified to see the shark shape, shifting its victim under the weight of its increased strength. They were aware that if they wanted to save Jimmy's life, they needed to act right away, but as they watched helplessly, they couldn't help but worry whether it was already too late. Jimmy struggled mightily, but his naked hands were no match for the vicious predator that had its biceps clenched around his knees. A disgusting concoction of blood, shredded human meat, and salt water swirled about them in the ocean. The shark kept up its vicious assault. Tony was focused on the horrifying image in front of him. His mind was unable to understand the beast in front of him for what it was. Jimmy could feel the shark's enormous teeth ripping and tearing at the skin with a vicious and unyielding power as they hovered over his legs. The air was filled with the horrific crunch of the shark's teeth grinding against one another, and Tony could feel it throughout his whole body. Tony had a surge of panic and nausea as the seconds passed. His heart was beating rapidly. He wanted to turn his head away to protect himself from the horrors playing out in front of him, but he was unable to do so. As the seconds passed, Jimmy's troubles became progressively worse. His body gave in to the anguish and suffering the ruthless predator had caused. The shark seemed to perceive its success, tenacity, and unwavering strength as it dragged Jimmy's crumpled, lifeless body lower and deeper beneath the ocean. As the ship's crew hurriedly attempted to get Tony back on board as soon as possible, mayhem broke out. Their anxiousness and panic sent their hearts racing. The horror of what they had just seen left their thoughts in a state of disarray. They dragged Tony onto the deck of the ship with quivering hands. As soon as they realized he was still alive, they felt a wave of relief. But as they turned to face the lake again, their delight was replaced by terror as they only saw a sizable pool of red. The awful fallout from the shark attack. Tony's bodily wounds would become better, but he would live the rest of his days with psychological wounds. He would continue to be traumatized by the vicious assault, a continual reminder of nature's ruthless might and the frailty of existence. 1948 brought chilly November winds that rushed over the seas off the coast of St. John, a little peaceful island tucked away in the U.S. Virgin Islands. With his buddies, Christopher Oswald had just finished a long and wild night of drinking and daydreaming. His steps are shaky due to the alcohol's residual effects on his thoughts. Awe, inspiring, towering, jagged granite cliffs rise from the clear blue seas below the rough peaks shaped by the unrelenting power of the sea along the coast of St. John, U.S. Virgin Islands. With a powerful roar, the waves pound the coastline, sending 1,000 little fireworks, like bursts of white froth into the air. However, Christopher and his companions were unable to walk, so the beauty of the shoreline had no meaning to them. Christopher Oswald staggered onto the boat after a night of drinking, smelling of alcohol and balancing precariously. He was inebriated from the night's celebrations. As the boat sped through the murky seas toward their goal, his thoughts were jumbled and his behavior erratic. Christopher may have felt some illusory security due to the wave's soft laughter. With a loud, drunken laugh, he suddenly threw himself over the side of the boat, his body falling into the below. "Ice water!" Gasps, screams, and shock rang out as Christopher's actions left his pals and the crew speechless and stopped in their tracks, frantically trying to get him back to safety. Christopher is obstinately submerged in the sea despite their desperate calls for him to come to them above the wind and waves. As the boat dragged aimlessly, the second of them eventually threw a lifebuoy attached to a rope in an effort to get Christopher back on board. His inebriated mind had him believe he was invincible. Their voyage came to an unexpected and unwelcome end as a result of his intoxicated stubbornness, which prevented him from moving from his position in the water. The peaceful nighttime seas abruptly descended into turmoil as Christopher's cries reverberated throughout the boat and the surrounding sea. His crew and pals on the yacht desperately looked for him. When they finally realized what was going on, their shock turned to terror. They recognized with a sickening sense of dread that Christopher was being attacked by something in the depths as the water surrounding him changed into a blood-red pool. Once again, the marshal fumbled through the buoy in an effort to free Christopher from whatever was holding him down. However, a massive bull shark appeared from the shadows as soon as the buoy touched down in the water. Its enormous jaws violently tore in Christopher's flesh. The shark's razor-sharp teeth tore through Christopher's neck and shoulders, gushing blood like a makeup fountain into the air. Christopher and his companions' shouts mingled with the sounds of the water being violently ripped apart by the shark assault. As the passengers struggled to fathom the horror playing out in front of them, the boat violently shook. The vicious attack was a heart-stopping scene that, with its strong jaws and razor-sharp fangs, destroyed the tranquility of the calm water. Rapidly striking was the vicious bull shark. Poor Christopher had little hope of surviving the continuous, horrific onslaught. The ferocity of the shark's bite broke bones and tore flesh apart as it clamped down on his neck and shoulders. Blood poured forth like a fountain, staining the water around it in a shocking act of violence. The terrified episode was observed by the passengers on the boat, who screamed in fear and shock. As they witnessed Christopher's life leave his body, they were paralyzed with disbelief and were unable to talk or move. The once active guy had become a limp, lifeless figure as a result of the vicious predator. The shark attacked with a viciousness that bordered on frenzy, and it seemed intent to do as much damage as possible. The monster made a rush towards Christopher's helpless body. Its teeth were clenching onto the pieces of his body that were already ripped. As the shark swung its victim back and forth, shredding him apart, the water transformed into a fury of crimson. The people inside the boots watched in fear, unable to stop the shark from continuing its vicious attack. As it dawned on him, Christopher's end was certain. When the shark had successfully killed its victim, it would release it. The shark then pulled Christopher's lifeless body beneath the water's surface, disappearing into the murky depths of the ocean. Christopher's severed arm floated eerily in the water as a haunting reminder of the tragedy, along with waves of blood that continued to ripple across the water's surface. With adrenaline pumping through his veins, he thought back to the brutal assault that had just happened. As they rushed away from danger, the skipper hurriedly guided the boat away from the deadly vortex of blood and horror. The passengers watched the events unfold with horror and bewilderment. Even though the authorities were informed right afterwards, days and weeks of searching turned up nothing. The corpse of Christopher Oswald remained unfound, lost to the gloomy and merciless ocean depths.